Well, greetings, lovely humans, and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking through something I had a request for a little while ago, and I thought it would make the perfect video for the CosTube Symposium. If you don't know, the CosTube Symposium is an event happening over this weekend across YouTube from various different creators, and I will link in the description to the schedule so you can look for other really cool videos, really cool creators, and even like panel discussions and stuff like that. Yes, so someone who watches my channel came to me with a question, and their question was, how do you always push through every single challenge and block and hiccup you run into? So I'm going to get into that. Now, the biggest thing I need to draw your attention to when talking about this is the projects you see on this channel are the projects that I finish. I feel it's very important that I highlight that. It's really easy when you look at someone's online existence to think they have it all sussed out, they have it all together, and trust me, that is definitely not the case. The videos that you see on my channel are always about projects that I actually finish making, because it would be really unsatisfying for you as a viewer for me to be like, oh, I'm gonna make this really wonderful, amazing thing, and then not actually do it. So it is important to keep that in mind. The projects you see are the projects I finish. I do not finish all of my projects. In fact, this box is entirely filled with projects I haven't finished. There's a lot of them, including things like a wool jacket that I think I cut the first pieces out for in like 2018 and then finished constructing in 2020, realised that I hated it because it was so unbelievably oversized that it just completely drowned me, and picked it apart with the plan of recutting and remaking it again. There is a dress I started making and didn't finish, a small quilt I started making and didn't finish. Oh, literal like stage costumes to use with my band that I didn't finish and I started 3 years ago. I don't finish every project, to be clear. But let's get into how I finish the projects that I do actually finish. There are a couple of factors to it. One of them is just my personality and how my brain works. I really thrive on intensity and challenge, and I tend to work a lot better under pressure. Having a deadline of putting out videos really gives me a very clear, very tight do-or-die deadline for getting my projects finished. It is far easier for me to push through difficulties that I have when I know I have a limited amount of time to complete things in, and that kind of pressure gives me clarity and the motivation that I need to really persevere through my frustrations and difficulties. Another factor is that I actively really enjoy problem solving. I take a lot of joy and satisfaction in problem solving and find it kind of invigorating, and that means I can encounter problems with a certain kind of attitude. Another factor that makes it easier for me to push through barriers when I encounter them is I generally go into my projects with not very many expectations. I'm not really a planner. You'll know that if you've watched any of my videos. I tend to approach things with an attitude of experimentation and exploration. I often focus on making things I haven't made before, trying things I haven't tried before, doing things I don't actually know how to do. So I don't go into a project expecting it to turn out perfect or good even. That allows me to be very adaptable. I've found that if you go into a project expecting to make something perfect or beautiful or ideal to everyone, you're going to keep getting stuck. And I will tell you for why. In my experience, every single creative process involves challenges and frustrations, unexpected difficulties, and stuff going wrong. Every time. Literally. So by expecting something to turn out exactly as you imagined it, you're sort of setting yourself up for a bunch of additional difficulty, because then every bump you hit along the way becomes a failure and a fundamental obstacle standing in the way of you executing your vision. Whereas when I go into a project with an attitude of exploration and a kind of, oh, I'd like it to turn out a bit like this, but we'll see type vision, it means that every bump I hit along the way becomes an opportunity to adapt and overcome and problem solve. It also makes the process far more enjoyable. It means that when I run into those bumps, they're just learning opportunities. And if I end up making something I hate, then oh well, kind of like the jacket. I made it, I didn't like it, so I'm going back and correcting it to make something that I do like and I will wear eventually, you know, when I get around to it. And I did learn something useful from it, which is never ever ever trust patterns' body measurements, always go off the finished garment measurements. Yes. Something else that I have found helps me push through creative blocks when I encounter them is being willing to make something bad or make something very poorly. The biggest thing that has changed in my creative process over the last couple of years is coming across the phrase, done is better than perfect. Now, my mum regularly describes herself as a recovering perfectionist, and I heavily identify with that because I do have the ability to imagine, sometimes in excruciating detail, exactly what I would like to create and exactly how it would look, which can actually be a huge problem because either it can lead to me being enormously frustrated when the thing that I created didn't live up to what I had imagined, or it can lead me to being so unbelievably resistant to the idea of what I make falling short that I don't actually start it in the first place. But if I go with done is better than perfect, I'm aiming for completion, not perfection. And that opens up an entire realm of possibilities, because instead of desperately trying to shoehorn the thing you are making into an incredibly specific vision you have, you're just getting it done. And that allows your process to become about problem solving and adaptation because you're actually allowed to adapt. Now, I am not saying do not have a vision, do not have a plan. What I'm saying is, if your vision or your plan are so rigid that you are unable or unwilling to make any deviation from them whatsoever, you are setting yourself up for an intensely unpleasant creative experience and making it harder for yourself to finish anything. Another thing that makes overcoming challenges more doable is expecting challenges. I know that sounds simplistic, but it is true. It is the nature of the creative process. There are hiccups and roadblocks and bumps in the road, as in life. Things don't always turn out how you expect them to. And to a certain extent, going into creative projects knowing that there are going to be problems that I need to solve makes them much more manageable when they do crop up. Because then those roadblocks and bumps and hiccups aren't any kind of personal failure, they're just part of the creative process. And in that case, the thing that reflects on me as a person or maker or creator becomes how I deal with those problems, not that they're there. Now let's talk finding joy in problem solving, hey? That can be the next topic. Being able to look at an issue that crops up and view it as an opportunity to essentially flex my brain completely changes the game. As frustrating as it can be when things go wrong, that is, in my opinion, usually where the most interesting stuff happens, and where I just really get to use my noggin. And interestingly, the projects that I don't finish, the ones I tend to get stuck on and not be able to complete, very rarely have a serious problem that needs solving. Generally, it's that something went wrong that is a pretty easy fix, but it's boring to fix, and so I just don't. The blocks and the problems I face that I tend to really push through are the ones where I really have to engage my brain, because I find them stimulating, so on some level I find them satisfying, and for some people that just won't ever be the case because that's not how they experience problem solving, which brings me to my next point. There is nothing wrong with putting down creative projects. Nothing wrong with it. Putting them down and coming back to them at a later point in time, that is totally fine. Putting them down and never coming back to them, also totally fine. There is this huge cultural drive that drills into people from a very early age, oh, if you start something, you've got to finish it, and you don't. You don't have to finish it. If it's not exciting you, if it's not fulfilling you, if you're not enjoying it anymore, you can just stop. That is allowed. You can do that. There are absolutely projects where I've been like, you know what? This isn't doing it for me anymore. I'm actually not enjoying this anymore. So what's the point? I do not think it is a valuable use of our time as human beings to force ourselves to see out creative projects in our own damn time, in our free time, for our own enjoyment that we're no longer enjoying. Not to be macabre, but we have precious little time on this earth, and to be honest, if you're no longer enjoying the dress you're making, just make a different dress. There's this whole cultural idea that it's really bad to quit, and like, I don't think it is. I think making a strategic decision about when to stop flogging a dead horse is an excellent move, and a top-notch skill to develop. So that's my strange philosophical moment for the video. but maybe one more philosophical moment, because what even is a problem? Quite often, I found that things that I viewed as problems when they were occurring, when I was working on them, and when I was frustrated by them because they weren't the thing I expected them to be, have ended up being something I have really liked when the project is finished. For example, when I made my Nightmare Before Christmas masks, I was incredibly frustrated that the foam clay I was working with created divots and wrinkles and texture where I didn't want there to be any. I had imagined these masks being like really smooth and swish and sleek, and that didn't happen because of the speed that I worked in comparison to the speed that the material I was using dried. And I was so annoyed when I was sculpting them. But when it came to painting them, those divots and creases allowed me to create some incredible bark-like texture. Some of them were really amazing for creating the illusions of knots in wood, and it became this amazing opportunity to enrich this thing I was creating. So something I had seen as a huge problem actually became a feature and became one of my favourite things about the entire project. It is really easy to look at snags when we encounter them during a making process as these kind of project-destroying catastrophes. But when I have been willing to approach them as an opportunity to adapt and been willing to alter what I was doing to really work with the materials I was using, it's let me make something far more interesting than what I would have thought to create. Instead of looking at these things as a fundamental problem, it becomes a question of, okay, how do we work with this? How do we alter the plan so that this fits into it? There is an excellent video that I will link in the description, and I highly recommend you check it out. It's from a maker I really enjoy watching called Peter Brown, who, from everything I've seen, seems to be a lovely human being. In this video, he's talking about different kinds of makers, and he uses Jamie and Adam from Mythbusters as examples. I encourage you to check out the video, but the short version is Peter Brown basically posits that there are two types of creators: detail-oriented makers and big-picture-oriented makers. So detail-oriented makers tend to research and prepare and plan and then execute that plan. Unsurprisingly for anyone who has watched my videos, that is not me. I am, in this way of looking at things, a big-picture-oriented maker. So big-picture-oriented makers tend to follow a troubleshooting process. Most of their decisions tend to be made based on emotion. It is very much about trial and error and finding a thing that just feels right. So it's partly the kind of maker I am and the kind of personality I have that means I'm willing to look at issues that arise as an opportunity to learn and just see what happens. Which brings me to my penultimate point. Penultimate point. It isn't really enough to be willing to make something imperfect. You need to be willing to make something that's actively terrible, because that's just how you learn. And if you're experiencing genuine horror at that concept, I hear you, I get it, I do it, I feel it, but that's how you learn. That's how you figure stuff out and go on to the next project more prepared and more knowledgeable and able to do it better. It's how you develop skill. The final thing I will say is stubbornness is a very underrated personal quality in terms of being creative. I'm sure if you've watched my videos, you have seen me get to the point of, I don't care how long this takes, I don't care what I have to do or how many ways I need to try doing it, I am finishing this. There are absolutely challenges I have overcome because I can be an incredibly stubborn, bull-headed person, and when I decide that I want to do something, I'm going to do it. I think stubbornness is very underrated and can be very valuable in the right context. If you are more committed to completing something than you are to exactly what that completed something looks like, it gives you a huge amount of freedom and makes it far easier to push through issues. It becomes, okay, this is cropped up, how do I finish this? Okay, my ruffle's the wrong length, but how do I finish this? Okay, my lace isn't joining the way I expected to be able to join it, how do I finish this? As opposed to everything's gone wrong, it isn't going to be how I thought it was going to be, so everything's ruined. Essentially, how I overcome blocks and difficulties in projects can be summed up as learn to be a little less attached to outcomes, find a little more joy in the brain work that you get to do when presented with an opportunity to adapt, and be really, really bleeding stubborn about finishing things, but only if you're still, on some level, enjoying them. There you go. 3 easy tips to be a creative powerhouse and never have a problem ever again by not seeing them as problems. I'm sorry. Now, I was actually so hyped about making this video that I turned some of the key points into art. My patrons over at patreon.com/EmilySnee will get free digital downloads of these prints alongside their usual perks like post-show vlogs and behind-the-scenes content, but there is a link below where you can pick up physical copies of these, I'm calling them not-so-motivational posters. If you like this video, maybe consider giving it a like. If you wanted to keep hanging out, that would be really cool. So whether you decide to keep hanging out or not, I hope everything is okay in your world. I'll see you guys next time, and don't forget to check out everybody else's CosTube Symposium content. And yes, I have just been crouched on my sewing table like some kind of very carefully made up goblin. You're welcome. Bye. Okay, I have no saliva in my mouth. I would really love if my neighbour's children would stop screaming for 3.5 seconds. That would be so handy. Nope. Literal demons. Battery! No! I don't understand why anyone spawns. No, thank you.